Hi everyone, and welcome to week 6 of Research Methods and Design. In this week, we will cover two chapters, chapter 12 and 13 of the textbook. Let's now summarize chapter 12, Agency Records, Content Analysis, and Secondary Data. Last week, we learned how, with survey research, the field researcher gathers their own data. Other ways of collecting data do not involve intrusion by observers. This chapter aims to introduce you to three sources of existing data and their applications in criminal justice research. First, there are data collected by federal, state, and local agencies such as Justice Statistics data, Bureau of Prisons data, even data from the New York City Police Department. Secondly, it is content analysis, the analysis of communication. These are social artifacts, written documents, or other types of messages. Thirdly, secondary analysis of existing data. This information is frequently used in criminal justice research. In a general sense, most data you obtain from agency records or research projects concluded by others are secondary data. The units of analysis represented by agency data may not always be obvious because agencies typically use different and often unclear units of count to record information about people and cases. Once units of analysis are defined, then sampling agency records is relatively simple. A target population and sample frame may be readily defined. You need to be alert for potential biases in the sample frame. Researchers must be especially attentive to possible reliability and validity problems when they use data from agency records. Key to evaluating the reliability and validity of agency records, as well as the general suitability of those data for a research project, is to understand as completely as possible how the data were originally collected. Follow the paper trail and expect the expected are two general maxims for researchers to keep in mind when using agency records in their research. Following the paper trail and expect the expected both involve examining the data collected and how it was collected. Many agency data are not designed for research. They collect data because the law requires them to do so. Content analysis is the systematic study of messages and the meaning those messages convey. It may be applied to virtually any form of communication. Possible artifacts include books, magazines, films, sports, speeches, TV programs, letters, laws, etc. This type of analysis is particularly well suited to answering the classic question of communications research. Who says what, to whom, why, how, and with what effect? Secondary analysis is the analysis of data collected earlier by another researcher for some purpose other than the topic of the current study. Archives of criminal justice and other social data are maintained by the ICPSR and the NACJD for use by other researchers. The advantages and disadvantages of using secondary data are similar to those for agency records. Data previously collected by some researcher may not match our own needs. Chapter 13 is a very important chapter, and it is designed to introduce you to the importance of applied research by specifying concepts and measurement tools. Evaluation studies are completed so that we may learn if a program is effective and why that is or is not the case. Problem analysis refers to using social science research methods to assess the scope and nature of a problem and then to plan and select actions to address the problem. An example is examining patterns of auto theft to decide what preventive and enforcement strategies should be pursued. Problem analysis focuses more on deciding what intervention should be pursued. Evidence-based policy is the use of data and other sources of information to formulate and evaluate justice policy. This usually means planning justice actions based on evidence of need, such as deploying police patrols to crime hotspots. It also includes assessing the result of justice policy, such as measuring any change in recidivism among a group of offenders processed through drug court. Now, more than ever, traditional practices are being reevaluated against evidence provided by social science research. Evaluation research and problem analysis are examples of applied research in criminal justice. Different types of evaluation activities correspond to different stages in the policy process: policy planning, process evaluation, and impact evaluation. As seen in the image here, the policy process starts with some demand that appears to support new course of action or opposition to existing policy. Let's talk about a few components of this process. 1. Ultimate goals. Policymakers consider ultimate goals they wish to accomplish and different means of achieving those goals. Resources must be allocated from available inputs, including personnel, equipment, supplies, even time. Some recurring problems or issues, routine practices, and decision rules must be addressed. 2. Policy outputs. What is actually being produced? Impacts. What is the policy trying to achieve? Outputs. Embody the means to achieve desired policy goals. 3. Policy model can be expressed as a simple cause and effect process. And 4. Policy can be viewed as a hypothesis in which an independent variable is expected to produce change in some dependent variable. An assessment may be undertaken as a scouting operation or a pre-evaluation to determine whether it is possible to evaluate a particular program. A careful formulation of the problem, including relevant measurements and criteria of success or failure, is essential in evaluation research. Evaluation research may use experimental, quasi-experimental, or non-experimental designs. As in studies with other research purposes, designs that offer the greatest control over experimental conditions are usually preferred. The use of randomized field experiments requires careful attention to random assignment, case flow, and treatment integrity. Randomized designs cannot be used for evaluations that begin after a new program has been implemented or for full coverage programs in which it is not possible to withhold an experimental treatment from a controlled group. Quasi-experiments distinguished from true experiments by lack of random assignment of subjects. They may also be nested into experimental designs as backup should one or more of the requisites for a true experiment breaks down. Quasi-experimental designs may be the strongest possible approach for evaluating nationwide or statewide programs in which it is not possible to identify subjects who are not exposed to an intervention. The scientific realist approach to applied research focuses on mechanisms in context rather than generalizable causal processes. Criminal justice agencies are increasingly using problem analysis tools for tactical and strategic planning. Crime mapping and other space-based procedures are especially useful applied techniques. Problem solving, evaluation, and scientific realism have many common elements. Evaluation research entails special logistical, ethical, and political problems because it is embedded in the day-to-day events of public policy and real life. Public policy involves making choices, and that involves politics. We need to be aware of different stakeholders, who are people who have some direct or indirect interest in the program or evaluation results. It can produce conflicting perspective or evaluations. Applied researchers bridge the gap between the body of research knowledge about crime and the practical needs of criminal justice professionals. Researchers must remain vigilant in the face of political influence in criminal justice research because of two reasons. One, politics is more concerned with the substance and use of research findings, and two, there are no formal codes of accepted political conduct comparable to codes of ethical conduct. For this week, make sure to complete exams 12 and 13 on MindTap and the discussion board by the end of the week. Before you attempt to complete the exams, make sure to read chapters 12 and 13 to gain the necessary knowledge to ace your exams and discussion board. Also, take this week's knowledge and work on the research project if it is relevant. Have a great week, everyone, and looking forward to seeing you in the forums.